Welcome out everybody to the launch event for Ethan's new book, The Night Books. We're going to jump into some questions here, but because I have the microphone, I'm going to be first. So my first question is, and it may be the first question on a lot of people's minds being introduced to this book, where did it come from? So you obviously there's a long history, right? You mentioned there's been a lot of different iterations, a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. So take us back to the very, very start. Where did this idea begin?
This book, it was in 2008, I think, if I'm remembering right. And I really wanted to do a film project so bad. And I love vampires a lot. And it was a little bit of a protest against Twilight because it had come out that same year.
2008?
That was around, yeah. So it was when I read it. I think it was before that, but I had read it and I kind of needed an active protest to show that vampires could still be gothic and not a teen romance interest. So I kind of wrote from there, and what I really wanted to do was write a story that had this kind of fantasy feel, but also had a lot of steeped lore in kind of that gothic Frankenstein, Dracula, that kind of feel. So I think it is a combination of fantasy, which I love and you love, and hopefully a lot of us love, as well as that kind of gothic world. And I just love that. I had my friends write down little character descriptions. We filmed it and it was so cringy at times and terrible, which is okay. But I really fell in love with that world. And so I knew I wanted to keep coming back. And so for the past 5 years or so, I've just been pausing and writing a story here or there. And then finally I wrote, I think my original was I wrote 30 tales, and then I picked the 23 that I felt were right.
So what happened to those other ones?
They're now called the Forbidden Tales in my Google Doc.
They're forbidden, everybody.
They're forbidden.
So hopefully we're gonna get maybe a little sequel or short story sometime. Forbidden Tales.
Yeah, maybe online, or maybe I'll do a second one with some more tales in it. Who knows? Or a special edition version with those added back in. I don't know. Something.
There you go. I like it. Now I have one more question popped in my head, and I'm going to be greedy again and take that. Then I promise we'll go to everybody else's questions, because you mentioned obviously you love vampires, you have for a long time, but as you mentioned, there's when you say vampire to somebody, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to get a different image in their head. Some people are going to get Edward. Some people are like, I think of Hideyuki Kikuchi's Vampire Hunter D.
Oh,
right?
So good.
Right? Like totally different things.
Yeah.
So what are the vampires like in this story? Like, what differences do we have from, like, say, Edward, or maybe even the classic Count Dracula? Buffy the Vampire Slayer jumps to my mind as well, because they had a very distinct taste of vampire too. So what are the vampires like in this book?
Great question. The vampires in this book are a lot more, I think, sympathetic than a lot of vampires you're going to see. And the reason why is that their lore, the way the vampires were created, is they were created like, think fantasy races like dwarves and elves. So vampires are just another class of a race in this world that have to live their own life. And one of the things I really liked about this idea when I started coming up with it was that these vampires are actually created from the beginning by something good that happens, which you'll have hinted. So usually you think of vampires as like a big curse or something awful, or
so there's heroes and villains that are both vampires.
Oh, absolutely. There's more villains than good guys, I would say, in the vampire grouping.
That makes sense. Plenty to look forward to.
Yay!
So I know you tend to write in sort of darker fantasy, and a lot of your writing seems to be in darker fantasy. Why do you choose to write in that? And do you have anything else that is different than that?
Yeah, great question. So I think I've also, my mom, who is on Zoom, can attest to this. I was called by her the King of Halloween from a very young age. So I just always loved like the spooky, creepy stuff. I would throw Halloween parties all the time. So I think I've just always kind of stuck to that. And sometimes people are always like, wait, like people who know me, I'm not a very dark person when I'm talking to people. Like I love to laugh and have fun. But there's just something I'm a firm believer that the darker the shadow, the larger the light to cast that shadow, right? And so even though there is a lot of dark in this book, I would argue that there, particularly in that last story, the 23rd, there's a lot of light that you get to see as well. So I love that contrast. For anyone who has seen any of my amateur films, I boost the contrast on shots like a lot. And that's just kind of how I live my life in my writing as well. And in terms of other stuff, I love comedy. There's not a ton of that in this one. But I also really like romance as well. I like it even more now that I'm married and have read some great romances that my wife has recommended. And there is a couple of stories that have some solid romance in this. Good question, thank you.
Being eager to get any more tidbits of the story I can get. Are there any characters in the short stories that you particularly love or your heart is attached to that you love to kind of see their story?
What a good question. Yeah, there's a lot actually. There's one called Aridel, and I love Aridel's character. She is such a warm-hearted, good soul. And in this book that is really has a lot of hard, tragic stuff happen. She is a light in that book. And I think, and even she has horrible things happen to her and she still believes. And so I love Aridel a lot. And then on the opposite end of that, on the cover, you'll see there's these two mysterious figures. One of them is only called the figure in purple. And I love the figure in purple. One of my favorite stories that I first shared with my wife before we were married is one that has the figure in purple in it. And she is so Disney villainly evil, and it's wonderful. And I love that as well. I love to write that. She's terrifying and creepy and weird, and I love that. So those are two characters that I just love.
So I may know more of the answer to this question than most people in this room, but I would love to know what your process is like as an author, because it's very different from person to person, and particularly what it was like on this book.
I would say that, yeah, my process is I am a really good mix between a pantser and, which for those of you who are not like writing people, that means you just go for it. And then the other one is called a planner.
Yeah.
Is that right? And planners are people who like have everything structured from the beginning. I'm right in the middle where I will plan quite a bit, but then I give myself some loose areas where I can make it up where I'm there, which I love because then it feels like I kind of get to discover the world along with like the characters as they discover it. And those spots end up getting edited a lot. I'm sure Elena can attest to. But yeah, so my process for this one was a little different because I didn't know I wanted to have it published. And so I wrote the stories separately on their own here and there. And then I started compiling it and it went through 4 or 5 different timelines of which stories will go in what order. And I ultimately decided the most straightforward approach was best for this one. So
are there characters from your short film that you created 12 years ago that have made its way into the book?
ooh, what a really good question. Lots, actually. So I did a thank you to those actors, and looking at them, every single one of them is in it. All of them. So everybody's in there at one point or another. That story, Dallas, is a character that was played by Clarissa Letty, and Kale was played by Mike White, both really great friends that I had and awesome inspirations for the character. And so the other 3, Master Hesh and Dallas's mom and dad, they're original characters that were not in the show, but those other ones were. So yes, lots of them are in there.
Were you at all inspired by James Joyce's The Dead? He seems to use that same technique of one world with story snippets.
Yes, that's a great question. Yeah, I love James Joyce. And in my college experience, I had to read Dubliners, which is all of his short stories that have connections, The Dead being his most famous story in that book. Yes, I love James Joyce and I loved how he handled it. I did a paper on Evelyn and I loved that book. So yeah, that is some inspiration.
And then who is your editor and who is your publisher? What was your journey in getting this story published?
Hi.
Hello. So this is my editor. She's beautiful and lovely and incredible. And I don't just say that because I'm married to her. I say it because I have got to see her edit several books now. And every time I've just been stunned at how incredible she is at it. So she's awesome. She's my editor.
And then we know you are a very busy person as a teacher. What is your writing schedule like? What is your writing space like? And how does it help you focus?
My writing space. My writing space is my classroom most of the time. I am somebody who just I really like to write, and so I find time to spend anywhere I can. And so luckily, since I'm an English teacher, when they're doing English journals or something like that, I want to be an example to them. So I will put the book up on the screen that I'm currently writing and I will type it as they go. Which sometimes I have to stop if they get too distracted and stare at the screen. But the point is not for them to read my novel. The point is for them to write theirs. So luckily that is a time where I can write a lot. I would say on average, when I'm in a consistent writing schedule, which sometimes I fall out of, I'm hitting about 1,600 words a day or so, sometimes more.
I saw on Instagram or Facebook that you are currently doing NaNoWriMo. What are you currently working on?
Oh, great question. I'm working on a story that's really, really special to me. It feels magical, unlike other, I mean, this book was great, of course. I love this book, but this one, it feels special. That's all I can say to describe it. It's a fantasy, and it is a world in which, imagine if all of you guys at the age of 10 would get your own personal dragon that you get to bond with, and they're going to live with you for the rest of your life. But what happens when other people who don't get dragons start to threaten that village and want to come in and steal some of that away? It evolves from there. But it's a straight fantasy, and I love dragons, and I feel like a lot of people love dragons, and so I want a dragon, and I can't have one, so I'm going to write a book about it.
Okay, two quick ones. One is the reason why it's called the Night Book. Is that because of Night, the character, or is it separate from that and you just name the character Night?
Yeah, so yeah, my wife said I would kill you if that was the reason why. I never thought of that until this very moment, and thank heavens that title is not based on that character. He's only in the, oh no, he's in 2 stories. Yeah, but he's the only one where something horrible happens to him, and I'm like, it's fine. It's called the Night Book. Actually, it was originally called the Black Tome. But as I wrote it, what Colby said earlier, I think is really apropos, which is that the feeling is like a cozy fire and like in armchairs and reading it. And so what I wanted this to be is in the same way that when people pull out The Night Before Christmas on Christmas Eve and read it, I want this to be like the Halloween edition of that concept. So it's called the Night Book because I wanted people to put it on their bedstand at night and have it next to them as like a little coffee companion kind of deal that you can just pick up and flip to your favorite story and read that one before bed.
The other question was, besides the characters that you mentioned already, is there a character that you would like to give a hug to and a character that you would like to punch?
I'm going to exclude Knife from this one because of course I want to punch him, but I'm going to say that if I could give a hug to any character, man, there's a lot of characters that need hugs in this book. I'm going to say Andrea is an obvious choice, the one that I said I smeared like the whole book. But if I can't choose Andrea, since I've already talked about her, I'm going to pick Aradel. I think Aradel needs a hug. I think Morrigan needs a hug too, but Morrigan would probably stab me if I hugged him. So characters I would punch in the face. I would punch the figure in red in the face. He's on the cover right here. So figure in red, I would punch in the face, but I probably wouldn't make it to him because I'd be dead before that happened.
Awesome. Well, I will kind of send off our Q&A section with one last question.
Awesome.
So you mentioned a few things. We mentioned before you're working on several projects right now. Right now, somebody mentioned NaNoWriMo. Yeah, thank you. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's National Writing Month. So it's a challenge to write a novel in a month or 15,000 words, whichever comes first. And you said you're doing that. So my question, because I speak for everyone.
Oh, what's about to happen?
What is, and I know as an author myself, it's hard to really gauge what's coming out next and what's going to hit the ground first, but what is next? What's the next project that's going to be on a table in front of us?
Wow, that is a good question. I'm gonna, well, let me answer that with 3 answers. It's most likely to be one of 3 options.
I was going to say, you can, it's likely to change.
You know this
What's
one.
the phrase? But yeah, to be determined, but
Very
for your current guess.
If I were to guess, fictional is possible. That one is going by traditional publication. And it won a BYU, it's a middle grade book that takes place on Halloween. I'm very predictable. But that one is about a kid that stumbles over the dead body of one of his classmates in the woods behind his house and has this big mystery about it. So that one is.
And unlike the Night Book, I have read that one.
You have?
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that one for sure to be officially released.
So yeah, that one is likely. If that one doesn't work out, I would really love it to either be Miss Hunters, so Rachel can feel appeased, and I'll feel appeased, or which is a ghost story, right? Like a traveling ghost story.
And I've read that one too. I'm on the inside.
Yeah, you are. And if it's not that one, then I hope it's this dragon one because I love this dragon. But that one doesn't even have a title yet, so who knows?
That's the one I'm personally most excited about is the new one. Again,
You being
insider information. I can't reveal anything here, but yeah, no, he's explained to me kind of a lot of the stuff that's going into this new project. So I'm most excited for that one. So is it fair to just say, maybe we can just say for now, all of those are going to land at the exact same time?
I would love if that would occur, and I don't want anyone to expect it.
All right. Well, of course, a lot of you guys are connected with Ethan in various ways. So if there's any other questions you have, he's always available.